Welcome to the Easier Way to Sell presentation of Close the Deal Without Selling. Here's your host and developer of the Easier Way to Sell, Ike Krieger.
Hey, this is Ike Krieger. Welcome back. In this episode of the Close the Deal Without Selling podcast, we're going to cover a topic that I think will be near and dear to both your personal heart and the heart of your business. I'm talking about creating more revenue, and I guess that translates to making more money with your business. Our guest today, Mary Grothe, is an expert in revenue creation, and if there's one thing we would all like to be better at, is creating more revenue. So sit back and relax, get to your destination safely, get your favorite beverage, and join me for the Close the Deal Without Selling podcast. Intellectually, you want to increase your revenue. Emotionally, you want your business to make more money. Now, you can make more money because making more money is achievable. One way you can make more money is by helping more people solve their problem. And when you solve more people's problems, you receive even greater compensation than you are now. Easy peasy, right? It's all in your language. Of course. It's the language you use. It's the language you use with others that's important to your success. But more importantly, it's the language you use when communicating with yourself that bowls you over. Making more money is too often accompanied in your mind by a terrible-sounding business term called panic management. Here's an example of panic management. Think about a time when you tried to make more money when you really needed more money. Not so easy, is it? I've said for the longest time that the hardest amount of money to make is $20, especially when you need it. But you do want your business to grow, so what strategy do you have to increase your revenue? What plan do you have to make more money? Even before you come up with your strategy, you gotta know what your goals are. You have to know what you want to accomplish in your business. You've gotta know what you want. Most humans are great at knowing what they don't want, but have a hard time identifying what they do want. And here's a pertinent question. How much money are you going to make over the next year? And specifically, how are you going to do it? Most business owners and certainly most salespeople have no answer for that question. You'll continue to do what you've been doing. And doing what you've been doing has gotten you to where you are, and where you are usually means you want to increase your revenue, or you need to increase your revenue, or you must increase your revenue. However, if you knew how to increase revenue, you'd be making more money already. What if how you've been going about it has been backwards? You look inside and measure your strengths and start to pick out what it is that sets you apart from your competition, whereas you should be looking outward at your competition and seeing what they're doing. Now, in marketing, you're supposed to do something different than your competition so you'll stand out. Your opportunities lie in what your competition isn't doing. But when it comes to revenue, you want to do exactly what successful companies are doing. But I know your tendency. You're looking inside and trying to figure out how you can motivate yourself to be the cause of ideas and activities that will certainly produce an increase in revenue. And in most cases, humans keep doing what they've been doing, only they do it harder. Stop examining yourself. It's not about you. Behold the outside world. Examine what successful businesses do to increase revenue. If you're a business owner in charge of the bottom line, you're probably your own do-it-all CEO. And as legendary sportscaster Vin Scully would say, you are the chief cook and bottle washer. But who's doing your accounting? Who's doing your marketing? What are your productivity benchmarks? It doesn't matter what question I ask you. What matters is that you know the answers and can move the pieces on your business chessboard towards a more positive outcome. If you keep doing what you've been doing, you're going to keep getting what you've been getting. Now that I've thoroughly depressed you, I will show you the light at the end of the tunnel. Now, I do my best to give you ideas about how to break out from the way you currently look at your future by learning how to create an even better one. I've given you ideas about a lot of things. However, what I focused on mostly are your internal and external communication skills. My communications models were originally designed to enhance your ability to have authentic conversations in your business and your life. The model used in the easier way to sell works great in sales because your authentic conversation produces a willing prospect who takes over the responsibility of your sales. They sell themselves, and if you've used my system, you know that it works this way. In the Close the Deal Without Selling Action Guide, you'll find a revenue plan. You'll find several ways of projecting your business into the future. However, what I share with you is limited. I'm constantly searching for experts that can fill in some of the blanks beyond my own personal ideas and teachings. Our guest on this episode of the Close the Deal Without Selling podcast is, you guessed it, an expert in sales and revenue creation, Mary Grothe. Plus, and this is cool, among her many accomplishments, Mary has been named as one of the top 50 keynote speakers by Top Sales World for the second consecutive year. Mary provides companies with the answers to this question. What do I need to do to increase revenue? Why would you need someone from the outside to help you increase revenue? Because up till now, you're apparently not employing a strategy or tactics that produce the results you say you want. Now, join the club. I'm retired. I'm still in that club. So whether you're a $50,000 company or a $5 million company, the machine of your business is a prime candidate for a revenue-increasing tune-up. In our conversation, Mary will share some of her ideas on how to do that, and I think you'll be the better for it.
I had a formal 8-year sales career in the mid-market selling B2B SaaS software for a payroll and HR company. So I cut my teeth building up my sales skills in environments where I was selling to CFOs and HR people and whatnot. And that's where my skills came from. As I transitioned into selling solely and direct to the CEO, I found that they are never looking for a sales pitch and they're never looking for anything other than how can you solve my problem. A CEO doesn't have a lot of time. Their time is probably the most precious thing to them. And a lot of them, if you look at DISC personalities, are falling on the driver side. So a high D is what we would refer to. They don't have a lot of patience. Get to the point. Here's my problem. How can you help me? And I would say in our sales process, the thing that where I can get caught up is there's a million things that we can do over the course of 6 months to help a company grow revenue, and everything's custom built. At the end of the day, the CEO doesn't really care about the nuts and bolts. They want to just stay high level, and they want more of that promise of, can you get the job done? Yeah. And they're really looking for an ally. And our favorite CEOs are those ones that will just hand over the keys to the revenue kingdom and just say, I wasn't able to do it. You guys do it. Here you go and run. So in the sales process, I get hung up a lot on due diligence and making sure that the CEO that I'm talking to is somebody that is going to be a great CEO to work with. So in my sales process, I think the areas that are always top of mind is having to figure out how to explain a very detailed and complex service offering in the most simplistic way possible that isn't too simple because we have to justify our price tag, but then also how to vet the person I'm speaking with to make sure that I shouldn't be disqualifying them as somebody that isn't going to be great to work with.
Well,
so there's some complexities on my side.
If I may break in for 1 second, one of the conversations that I know you were involved with based on your podcast was how do you make sure that a client is qualified? And one of the big of my set of golden rules is you have enough problems with your non-problem clients. To take on a client that you know is going to be a problem is insanity. And I want to acknowledge you for just having that be at the front of your conversation because of how important it is to me. I'm sorry, go ahead. You were just talking about explaining what you were doing and making sure that it wasn't too detailed.
Yes, I love the interruptions, so keep them coming. As
All
far
right.
as selling to the CEO, it was a transition for me for sure. Early on, I listened to my own sales conversations and would coach myself and realize on the playback, Mary, you're talking too much. You're
Good.
talking too fast. You're getting into the weeds. You're losing their attention. And so I really challenged myself early on in my own self-diagnosis of what's going wrong here on how do I be a better salesperson. Another thing is misaligned expectations. We sell something that a lot of CEOs want. It's really easy to be like, hi, do you want more sales? Do you want to grow revenue? Because we figured out how to do that for, I don't know, 100 other companies and we did really well. Like, do you want it? It's, yeah, like what CEO is going to say, we're not interested in earning more money or growing more revenue? There's very few out there that wouldn't want that. You see what I'm saying here, not
The
in a
ultimate closed-end question response.
Right. Yes, we
Would you
want more
like to be
business.
rich?
Right, exactly. Thank you. So I have to be really careful in misaligned expectations because it does take two to tango. And there's a lot of work that we can do, but if the company's product or service is not innovative and doesn't fare well against the competitors, like we had a client who did less but charged more than their competition. And I'm like, hi, I'm not a magician. Like I built a killer sales team for them and loved being a part of the journey, help revitalize their marketing. But sometimes you can't make things happen that aren't able to happen, if that makes sense. Like you can't feasibly scale a company that does less but charges more than the competition and is viewed as super outdated. So there's a lot of due diligence that has to go in to a quick, brief, to the point sales conversation that at the same time is me guiding them through a conversation without being over the top and over promising or making it sound better than it is, because it is a heavy lift on both sides. And so it's a very interesting sale. It's one of the most complex yet quickest sales cycles I've ever been a part of.
Well, obviously, you have command over finding out who indeed is a target market and how to communicate to that person so you can cut to the chase. Where I have found a lot of people end up talking too much is when they're trying to convince or influence someone into becoming a qualified prospect or even a qualified client. And then you ask them, so tell me again why you're getting this. And well, I don't know, you told me it was a good idea. And you end up with buyer's remorse pretty quickly. So again, a big acknowledgement for that. Give me an example of a question that you employ to, air quote, qualify a new prospect.
Well, one of the greatest things is if they've worked with a third party company before. So we have a couple of clients that are on their fifth, sixth, seventh consultant, and it's like red flag, red flag, red flag.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to dig into that pretty deep to understand what worked, what didn't work. And oftentimes what we'll find is if we've had a CEO that is on their umpteenth consultant, it's because they're just trying to find somebody to execute the plan they want executed and they're resistant to change.
Yes.
But they don't think that they're resistant to change.
How do you
think
break
they have an
through
open
that?
mind.
That is so powerful. And you talk about an objection, that's more than an oral objection. That is a human kinesthetic objection where they're sitting there going, I'm not giving up control. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, asking situational questions just to get specific examples. So you ask, like, what do I ask in order to disqualify or qualify? I ask for specific examples so that I can listen to the answer and use my own discernment on what they really mean and how they really are. So I ask more of a situational question of, so help me understand. So when the prior consultant delivered the plan, how was the plan delivered? What was that experience like? And what was your initial reaction to it versus what they did after that moment? Like, where was the
Yeah.
gap for you? When did the gap occur in the process? And so it's just very situational, because then
No,
I
I
listen.
understand. I do. That's really a powerful way to handle it. One of the things that I've been sharing with clients and companies for years is, if you think of yourself as a sales doctor or as a problem solver sales doctor and move yourself into, quote, an examination room and ask the same type of questions a doctor would ask, you tend to reduce the amount of talking that you have to do. Like if this was the eighth doctor, the person I'd come, okay, what did you expect from them that you didn't get? And how do I know I'm not going to be number 9?
Exactly.
And that, if that's the approach that's being taken,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so that's very helpful. Any further communication on disqualification that you think would be of help to our listeners?
We have a very what could be viewed as a pricey service. Well, price is only an issue in an absence of value. And
Okay.
as far as a disqualification with CEOs, I have found that there are 2 checkpoints with understanding their ability and willingness to make an investment. And the first point is getting a range. So the gut check on range of what they're willing to invest to solve the problem after a pretty basic discovery conversation. I don't want to spend time going through a process, building a proposal, or doing anything until they know how much our service costs. But I can't bring that up prematurely if I haven't yet established value and created a sense of trust that I understand their problem and we have the ability to fix it, and that I have the confidence that we can fix it. So there is a fine line in that. And I feel like that's a finesse for people that are selling direct to the C-level that have an expensive or viewed deemed as a high ticket, high dollar product. You have
It,
it's a dance, but you have to
it's
do the gut check, because nothing is worse than going through an entire process and preparing the proposal and coming back and hearing, ugh, that's more than we were looking to spend.
Well, there's an old joke about the guy who gets on the subway and says, I'm trying to get off at such and such a stop. And he asks the guy behind, will you tell me where it is? And the guy says, yeah, just watch where I get off and get off the stop before me. And that's kind of what this reminded me of, because I did an interview with one of my good friends who's a CEO of a chamber of commerce. And we did a role play in which her first question out of her mouth was, well, how much is it really going to cost? And I went into that, but the shift was, well, it's not, so it's going to cost X amount of dollars. And if that's in your ballpark, that's fine. But it's going to take at least 3 hours of extra time per week. Where will those hours come from?
Mm-hmm.
And it shifted the whole conversation to, well, the money's really not that much. So what you're
Mm-hmm.
saying is so perfect. And one more thing before we continue. You have tapped into a marketplace that I have been telling clients to tap into for a very, very long time.
Mm-hmm.
Sales in and of itself can be challenging. And for those people who work in sales and think of themselves as problem solvers,
Mm-hmm.
one of the goals to being really successful, at least on the scoreboard called your bank account, is to solve expensive problems.
Yes.
Not everyone can identify and set up a coordinated effort that will help
Mm-hmm.
them. They haven't even identified such a thing. They haven't even looked at it. I'm curious, what was the psychology that was going on that had you say, this is really, yes, it might be a challenge, but I'm entering into that marketplace. It's kind of like Malibu real estate for
Mm-hmm.
those of us in Southern California. Without going into great detail of what you did, what was going on in your mind that said, yeah, I can do that. They need me. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what somebody who solves this problem gets compensated.
Yes, exactly. So that exact equation. One, I just put myself in their shoes because I'm the CEO of Sales BQ and I swim in my numbers all day long. I know my numbers. I live in my pro forma, especially when I was in those early stages of growth and scale. I was all over it. I knew my profitability. I knew when and where I can make an investment. I knew where my challenge areas were. And so I put myself in their shoes thinking they're a CEO of a company that's minimum 5 million in
You have
revenue.
entrepreneurs out there that are shaking in their boots thinking of all the work you had to do to be successful.
I know. But they're sitting, those CEOs they live and breathe by numbers. So a salesperson that's selling something that's very expensive with my quotation marks, price
Yes.
is only an issue in absence of value. And you have a CEO that they live and breathe and die by the numbers. They want to know results. They want to, how does this fit into their pro forma? Where is the lineup? When are they going to get their return? Why would they make the investment in you? Why you, not somebody else? And so if you can just speak in those terms, that's actually how they communicate. It's their language. It's
The
not like this big
language of
scary thing to
success.
talk about money.
Yeah.
So for me, because I was in that boat, I'm like, this is how I would want to be spoken to about this type of investment. Get to the point, how does it make me money? And why would I choose this over hiring somebody? So that is where I transition. So that's the second thing you said. A CRO out here in the market, and you can look, nationally, some of the bigger markets, a CRO could potentially be coming into a company with a $250,000 base salary, depending on the size of the organization, with upside up to an additional $250,000. So this could be a potentially $500,000 hire. Well, if you look in correlation with our services and you're getting 3 people at that level, but a focus of marketing, rev ops, and revenue, and you're getting 3 of them for less than the cost of that one. So about 2/3 of the cost of a full-time. So 3 people for one at 2/3 the cost, all of a sudden a $300,000 price tag really isn't scary because it's now viewed as not, I'm spending 300, I'm saving 200.
Yeah, 3 for the price of one. I really find that very powerful. And just for those out there who may be a little lower on the business learning totem pole, explain CRO.
Chief Revenue Officer.
There you go, the Chief Revenue Officer. As you look at a company, what I found most fascinating was when you explained what your organization does. I got it was less about the money that the company was paying you and more about the reward you would get if you helped them increase by X amount of dollars.
Yes.
And that mindset almost took the sales conversation out of the equation for me, because it would be just, let's talk. You're not going to believe this, but let's talk. 5 minutes, you'll know if there's a fit. And yes, it would seem that if you can identify how much homework is involved before you go into a company, how much do you have to know your prospect? Or is this cold and all of a sudden they open up, even if they're a referral? Mm-hmm. How do you break through?
Sure. For a prospective client calls, we have not earned their business yet. The amount of preparation I do is indicative upon my familiarity level of their industry.
Okay.
So because I come from payroll and HR, if we have another HCM company come to us and be like, we're interested in your services, I could roll out of bed and roll onto the Zoom call and nail it, because that is where I've worked for a decade and I know it inside and out and can provide extreme amount of value quickly. But I had a client, a prospective client meeting this past week, and they were in dental water treatment solutions. I did a little research before that meeting. Yeah, exactly. Dental treatment, water, like sanitation solutions. I mean, I was like, what?
I understand.
What do you even sell here? Like, I don't understand who buys it from you. What are your revenue channels? And so anyway, yes, I had to brush up on a lot of things.
What problem are you solving?
Oh my gosh, the trust equation in sales.
Yeah.
Trust is built based on your ability as a salesperson to to reduce PSI or perceived self-interest. And the way that you do that, if you can imagine an equation, is your credibility plus your business intelligence. The greater those are, it'll shrink your PSI, perceived self-interest, and then your trust increases. And so in my type of sale, direct to a CEO asking for a very hefty investment, I have a very short period of time to earn trust. And my way to do that is to have credibility and business intelligence. And it's the way that I articulate and can immediately get to the core and the root cause of their revenue problems and reach them to the point where they're like, aha, that's what we've been missing. Now I know why these other things didn't work. So it is a fine line of education to help them see why what they've done in the past wasn't fruitful for them and why they need to do something different than they've done in the past to get a different result, and guiding them through together in a conversation.
Well, as an old man in the sales industry, I look at what you're doing and have heard the way that you approach it. And of course, I'm a proud grandfather, and one of my grandchildren is a really great violinist among a lot of violinists, but she's really good. And I realize that not everybody has that type of talent. And whether or not it's a family member, I'm just in awe when I see someone who's a soloist, who's able to come out and be different than the rest. And I want to acknowledge you, and I keep using the word acknowledge because I don't know if you get acknowledged for it enough, but you have gotten to the place where I view you as a soloist, where that is not, oh, I need to do it by myself, but one who really has been able to reach a level of effectiveness and professionalism in an approach for people who are really picky. And what I am going to do after sharing that with you and expecting the $20 you promised me to say that, is what do you say to our listeners who may not have that innate talent? And we all know what an it is, that business intelligence of being able to go in and have that type of communication. What stages can our listeners, who some may be up and may even be your clients, but the ones who are just getting started and are going, help me, or have been selling for a while and are frustrated to death over the results they're not producing, what stages can they go through to become as organized and as effective in their approach as the approach you suggest?
Sure. Awareness is key. So they have to have a step of awareness first. That's number one. So
Explain
for me,
that. What is the awareness?
you have to know the magnitude of your current situation, of your current state. Oftentimes we believe what we know is true, but we need perspective. So something that is something I'm passionate about, and as painful as it is sometimes, I make myself do it often. I will have, even after this conversation, I'm always looking to be better. So I'll replay the tapes and I'll think, gosh, I should have been more concise in my answers. I shouldn't have had to interrupt me. I'm picking up on his interview style. I need to potentially slow down or be more concise, or I'll be my own self-critic and I'll think of these things. But then I will watch this back. And it'll create awareness for me because I'm only seeing this through my lens right now and interpreting in the moment.
Yes.
When I watch a playback or listen back to a recorded call and I see it as I'm standing outside of myself and can view the entire situation, I get perspective I can't get in this moment. That helps me see what I can't see right now. So if you're striving to get to the next level and to be better, but you're trying to figure out how to do that with your own slim lane of what you know from your own perspective, you're holding yourself back. So you need a step of awareness that will help you see all facets of it.
That was excellent.
Thank you. But it's hard. We don't want to see, sometimes ignorance is bliss. I don't want to know ultimately what it looks like. It's uncomfortable, but I know I want to be better.
I know I talked about, are you familiar with neurolinguistics programming?
Yes.
Then you know what chunking is. And I did an episode on chunking and used the 7 plus or minus 2 conversation of how many thought patterns humans can hold. And, my belief, and I am an optimist, but that for most people it's 2 plus or minus 2. And in keeping with that, people who are able to move around to those different levels on chunking, that are able to move up and down and sideways and look at all the aspects, versus those who sit there and go, well, this is what I know and this is what I know how to do. And that is my take on this awareness conversation. So I really I get how important that is.
It's beautifully said. I know that step number one is awareness, but then you have to understand your current state to your desired future state and just outline the gap.
Yeah.
So humans do great with structure, rhyme, and reason and knowing what we're working towards. So I would say to take any confusion out of it and just be very clear with yourself what your next goal is and what you need to do to accomplish it. So if you look at your current state and map it out, you can break it into sections that you're trying to improve. So after the awareness step, and maybe you hire a coach, maybe you hire somebody to help you, or observe, or a sales manager you can go to and say, I'm ready to get to the next level and I'm finally ready to listen. So I want you to give me this feedback and bring me perspective. So one thing is, you have to have a filter when you do that, because not every, you ask someone else for perspective and help, they may not know everything. So use a filter, but be able then to map out, here's my current state and here's where I want to be. What is the gap? And then create an action step for everything in the gap. So could be you as a performer, as how you're showing up to meetings and calls and what you could be doing differently. It could also be in your business. I looked at my business in our first year. I started as many CEOs do, and I was the chief everything officer, not the chief executive officer. And I gave myself a 6-month window to do it all. And in that time frame, I reached a point of absolute utter exhaustion. However, I created plans along the way for the roles and tasks that were required to be successful in my company that I no longer wanted to do. I built an expense around that, put it in my pro forma, forecasted it out, and then backed into the number. What do I need to produce in order to bring on headcount to take these off my plate? And once it's off my plate, what more does that free me up to do in higher performing tasks? So it's something you can bring into your business too, for your current state and desired future state. You just need to know the steps and stages along there and create the action plan, forecast it, stick to it, and actually execute and do it.
Oh, yes. And I want to say this with all respect and all knowledge of the challenges we all fail. You're probably the one who ruined the curve. The one who everybody looked to and said, I'm going to be like Mary. That's what we all need to strive for, is that consistency and the clarity and the planning and looking at life and each thing you're doing as a project. But remember, at the beginning of all of these things, projects, plans, they're all made up, and you have the future at your command, because the idea that you're stuck into something that you're making up is because you're thinking of the way it used to be. And what I get that Mary does is offer people the opportunity to move into a future that they've been going, how do I get there? How accurate is that?
Yes, I love future vision creation and then creating the steps to get there. It's blind spot for a lot of people. And it was a blind spot for me for years. I was living in this tiny little box that I had created around my life. And I thought, this is all that I had for me. And this was it. And this is all I'm capable of. This was all I was meant for. I was a number one rep. I was making a lot of money, but I was working for somebody else and I was selling a product and service that really didn't feel like aligned with my God-given purpose. And so, but I had golden handcuffs and I built this little box around my life. I built it and I lived inside of that box because I didn't believe there was more. And I thought, one thing I'm going to show you here that a business coach did for me. He drew a circle and he carved out this tiny little wedge in it. And it's a pie. And on this circle, he said, you've built this beautiful life for yourself in that tiny little wedge. And for most people, it's an admirable life and something they would strive for. But if you look at that tiny little wedge, and I just for 1 second got you to believe that there are things outside of that wedge that you are destined for, created for, and capable of doing, and that your world would be augmented by that level. Could you believe with me for a moment that maybe it's not the whole circle, but even if we can expand the wedge this much more, what meaning would that bring into your life and what could you do? And it was that exercise alone where I realized if there was truth in that statement, because I really felt like I had accomplished it all. I'd hit my ceiling. I was, whatever.
Great.
There's so much more destined for all of us. There are no ceilings. And it's just tapping into that source and making sure that we are heart aligned and our passions are there and we're doing right by others. We're serving people. We're bringing good into the world. And it happens to be aligned with our talents and what we're great at doing and breaking outside of the ceiling that we've created.
How can our listeners make contact with you?
Find me on LinkedIn. That's the number one place to connect for all things business related. And it's Mary Grothe, Grothe. And then if you want to see the personal side of my life, you can go to Instagram. We're renovating a 1950s farmhouse right now. I have a personal blog. I'm a woman of faith, so I talk about bringing faith into leadership and how I've merged those two sides of my life. So if that's of interest to you, follow me there, marygrothe.com. My Twitter, Mary L. Grothe. The middle initial snuck in on that handle. And then anybody wanting to learn more about Sales BQ, just hop onto salesbq.com. Enjoy the free sales training that we have on there. And if you think that you might be a candidate for our services, then reach out. I'd be more than happy to meet with you.
Oh, that's just wonderful. Thank you for sharing all of this marvelous information with the listeners of the Close the Deal Without Selling podcast. And I can safely say, after having a conversation with Mary and after reading some of the work that she has put out there very generously, that they fit together like a glove, that what you've learned with the easier way to sell and what Mary offers is just, again, putting that icing on the cake. And again, some of the things that Mary talked about, if you go back and look at last week's episode with my role play with Nikki, you'll see some of those conversations that were brought up that look exactly the same, whether they're for people who are running a $10 million company or a $100,000 company. And I really want to thank you, Mary, for making that be something that our listeners understand, that it's the same at no matter what level you are. You need to have a plan and then actually execute that plan and be flexible. Anything you'd like to say in closing?
Thank you. This is such a pleasure. Thanks for putting up with my long-winded sentences.
I loved them. It was just great. I love the energy. It actually got me going here. So thank you again, Mary Grothe. And did I say it correctly yet?
Yeah, I loved that. I like that.
All right, good,
That's
good,
great.
good. That's what's important. From all of us at Close the Deal Without Selling and the Easier Way to Sell, we want to say thank you. Well, I know you got a lot out of that. Mary's information and training is helpful for businesses of all sizes. So I invite you to go look at her material, read through her sales information. They're all just excellent. And then I invite you to make a plan. I can't emphasize that enough. Plan your work and work your plan. That'll help you make more revenue. This is Ike Krieger. See you next time.